Hello and welcome. I'm Rocking Out, and this is Reviews and Info. Today we've heard of some interesting news from the Black Nerd Comedy Channel. There's gonna be a Gem movie. That's right, only a few weeks or months or whatever after hearing about the release of My Little Pony Equestria Girls 2 Rainbow Rocks, we get Gem, the other cartoon series that was popular in the 80s and targeted for girls. The only difference between My Little Pony and Gem is Gem's origins are through rock and roll. So to have her in a movie about rock and roll makes perfect logical sense, as opposed to My Little Pony, who's just doing it because. It seems like even though we know nothing about these movies, they have the potential to basically have the same plot. Girls starting a band, battle of the bands, dubstep, all that stuff. This could be good or bad depending on how you take it. However, I have come to the conclusion that a movie about rock and roll doesn't necessarily have to be bad. A lot of people ask, can rock and roll hold a person's attention for an entire hour or more? And the answer is yes, if you have Jack Black play Rainbow Dash's teacher. But in all honesty, there are quite a lot of bands that have held a person's interest for not only an hour or more of screen time, but indeed for the entirety of a televised series. Some of these are cartoons that are about bands, and some of them are cartoons that have episodes about bands, but they all prove my point that the rock band formula can indeed work. Now, I haven't been able to find a list of animated series' bands on Google because Google's not cooperating for me right now, but let me list a few examples off the top of my head. Denver the Last Dinosaur, Josie and the Pussycats, Jabberjaw, Molly-O, Hi Hi Puppy Amiyumi, Powerpuff Girls, Bill and Ted, The Jetsons, The Flintstones, and beyond that, I honestly can't think of any more bands that were featured in cartoons and so forth. The point is that just because we're looking at stories that take up the entire duration of a movie that are supposedly about bands doesn't necessarily mean that the battle of the band plot or the forming a rock band plot will necessarily be boring. We've seen in all of those things that I mentioned and many others I didn't mention that characters forming bands can be interesting, even if you're not someone who, like myself, particularly doesn't like bands. It'll probably have one of those plots that's been done before, but it's really all about how the plot comes together in the end. I imagine we'll go through a period where the band isn't good at first, and they have rivals who are clearly better than them, and then they'll have a charity to try and play for and win money for, and a parent who's against rock and roll because it's rock and roll and not the music the parent grew up on, and they'll want their super talented child to drop out of the band, and then the band will have to get that child to get back in the band, and the kid will have to prove to the parent that rock and roll isn't evil so that they can have their band, and then the rival band will pull some kind of dangerous prank on the hero band to force them to not show up for the concert, and then the concert will happen and they'll almost not show up, but then they'll show up at the last minute, and then they'll play their music and wow the crowd and win, and stuff like that. But even if that is the plot or isn't the plot, the point is it's not about the predictability or whether this has been done before. It's about how it's presented. And I truly do believe with a lot of movies out there like Alvin and the Chipmunks, Scott Pilgrim, School of Rock, and so many others, the story of a rock band can hold a person's attention for an hour or 2 hours or however long, or even for an entire 13 or 26 episode cartoon series. So I'm not immediately put off by the prospect of either Jem or Rainbow Rocks. I'll probably definitely see Rainbow Rocks. Whether or not I see Jem as someone who was never a fan of the series to begin with is another story, but I do look forward to both and maybe a few others out there getting their shot in the big pictures. I think my big message is don't assume the worst. Hope for the best, and we'll see what happens when these movies really do happen. So my other point is that once again, a movie with one premise is being competed with by another movie of nearly identical premise to create competition. It's the same thing we saw with Pokemon and Digimon and Ninja Turtles and Samurai Pizza Cats and Power Rangers and VR Troopers, and everybody just wants to imitate everybody else, so we got that going on too. Anyhow, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for watching, and good night.